These are nice, almost 16-inch wide planks, cut 5/4 of the maple tree. Great color down here. These pieces are going to be the sides of the drawers. I'm cutting them up, and I think with a natural finish on the sides, they're going to be very pretty. This is the point at which I wish I had a nice 20-inch throw radial arm saw, but I don't, so I'm going to have to flip this after the first cut. My 20-inch planer, and I'm using it to do the rough cut on the top of the drawer parts. I've already flattened these drawer parts on my 16-inch jointer down below. Of course, I cut up all the planks. I saved you from having to watch all that. And now I'm going to go ahead and plane them and get them thickness. I'm shooting for 1 inch thick for the sides and the back. I can settle for a little less than that if we can't get that much meat out of these pieces, but it's important that they be true. As I run them through the planer, I'm seeing the curl. So there's a lot of curl in this particular maple tree, which is nice. Another thing to point out is, if I didn't have a dust collection system hooked up to these machines, I'd have a pile of shavings now big enough to fill up a big trash can. So having a good dust collection system in this case, which takes the shavings down below through a cyclone separator, is really critical if you're running a shop. Now, you recall from the discussion of making the center drawer pocket that I was able to attach the sides so that they tapered slowly wider towards the back of the opening, so when I slid a drawer in that was exactly the right size in the front, it would be just slightly loose in the back and not bind. Well, to do that on these drawers, due to the way the construction was made, I think the way to get that same effect is to glue on a thin veneer shim to the front of each of the openings, and that will be what I will fit the drawer to, and all the area behind these shims will be just slightly looser. These are very thin. It's just thin veneer. Be slightly looser so that the drawer won't bind, but it will still not be sloppy. So all I'm going to do is I've taken some blocks of MDF, I've coated them with clear packing tape so that I can then just clamp them to the fronts of these guides, and they'll effectively make the front of this just slightly narrower than the back. Nothing high-tech about this. A little glue. I'll just go ahead and do this one so you can see. Go ahead and put my little block there, and take my K-clamps, which are nice and plastic coated. They won't do any scratching or damage. Just go ahead and let that set up. We'll do that to each of these guides, and then we'll do a measurement, test our theory. I've got my little veneer shims glued into the first 2.5 inches or so. I've made a piece of plywood that is constant width, nice and parallel edges, to represent a drawer, and show you this is my test piece for making sure I've got this right. Okay, nice tight fit at the front, the slightest bit of looseness, just enough to be able to fit the drawer in, and then slide it on back, and at the back you can see there's just a little bit of looseness, but it slides nice and easily, and that's what you need to do. Use the planes to just do a little bit of touch up on the middle of the slides if they happen to bow out just slightly, but not much. And that's, if I can make the drawer the same size as that opening, it should just slide in and out very nicely. Okay, the way I'm making these drawers, first thing I'm doing is I fit the backs. These are the backs of the drawers. I fit them into the opening. I had to do some planing here and there and so forth to get them to fit just perfectly, but the idea is to get them to fit nice and snugly, and then I can design the rest of the drawers to the back. For example, drawer boxes are never perfectly square, so you got to take a little bit off here, a little bit out there to get a perfect fit. But now I know that this is the cross section of the slot, and so now I can just go ahead and line up my sides along here, cut the dovetails, and I'll make the sides, the dovetails, so that they're just a little bit, the sides are proud a little bit, just a slight amount, so that I can then go ahead and just plane the sides off smooth to get this same dimension, and then the whole drawer should slide right on in. Now the fronts will be a little different, because the fronts actually, for example, on this top drawer, go from here down to the middle of this divider, then this drawer goes from the middle of that to the middle of that. So the fronts are a little oversized in the vertical, but they're the same width. So they're going to have to be handled a little bit differently, but that gives you a general idea. We'll go ahead and go through the whole drawer making process. To get the alignment just right, I'm going to use the low angle smooth plane with a 50-degree bevel so that I don't get any tear out. And slowly work a taper for the side here that's not quite square with the case. We'll see how that looks. It's always a choice to be made making drawers whether to cut the dovetails by hand or by machine. And my rule of thumb is usually if I'm just cutting, say, one box, I'll do it by hand, especially if the material is thin. But if I'm doing multiple dovetails, I'll go ahead and use a machine, because after all, dovetails do take a long time to do, and the machines today just do a very good job. I'm using a Lee dovetail jig with a large half-inch shank dovetail cutter, 8-degree cutter. Right now I'm cutting the dovetails for the center drawer. All four joints, all four corners of the center drawer are through dovetails. So I can make the same setup and cut all four of them. When I'm doing the rest of the drawers, most of the drawers are similar in height, and so I only would have to make slight adjustments of the jig to go from drawer to drawer, and I can do all the back dovetails, which are also through dovetails. So I could save a lot of time using this for all the through dovetails. So I've got my setup made. I've already cut one set of tails just to make sure everything is right, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of the tails, and then I'll reset the jig for doing the pins, and the drawer should come together nicely. There's a set of dovetail tails on each end. The pins are cut much the same way as the tails. You simply flip this jig over and the alignment becomes pretty darn perfect. There is a little trial and error where you have to make some slight adjustments here to get a good fit. So you always start out with the pins a little oversized and then work your way down to where they're perfect. And then once you got the setting, you can go ahead and cut all the pins. And there you go, you get a good joint. Now I might point out that with this technique, I'm trying something a little different. Normally you make the pins a little bit proud so that you can then come and cut them down. But the way I'm doing these drawers, I have fit the front and the back parts of the drawers perfectly. And I'm making the pins just a tad shallow. So then all I have to do is come back and do just a couple light cuts with a plane on the sides, and we should get a perfect drawer fit. I've got all the dovetails cut using the Lee dovetail jig, except for the half-blind pins that are in the fronts of each drawer. And to make life a little easier, what I did was I cut dovetails using the Lee jig for the fronts of the sides. I'm just going to whack off about 3/16 off the end of these dovetails so that I can then transfer this to the front, and I'll have pins that are 3/16 recessed from the very front surface, and that way I only have to cut pins. So I've got a stop block on my cross-cut sled, blade set to the right height. Make sure that this is the front. Turn on the dust collection. Now I'm going to lay out the pins for the fronts of the drawers. What I have here is the left side middle drawer. This is the face. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark the depth along the sides at which the tails have to be into the wood. And I've got a marking gauge set for the right dimension, which is the length of the tails that I cut. Okay, so that's how deep the tails, the pins need to be cut. Okay, the next thing is that these drawer faces hang over the dust dividers in the front, both bottom and top. So they're actually higher than the drawer sides. That's why I haven't been able to use the lead dovetail jig to cut the pins, is because this would not fit in the jig correctly. So I've gone and marked the amount of overlap. So that line there shows where the side bottom starts and the side comes on up that way. So I'll line up everything to that mark. Also, the width of the, or the depth of the pins has to be just a hair less than the thickness of the sides. What I want is the sides to just protrude by a hair so that I can just take them down very gently with a plane and have a perfect fit for this drawer. So I've got another depth gauge that I have marked for the depth of these sides, and I'll go ahead and just scribe a line. Okay, now because my eyesight is getting a little worse with age, I'm going to go ahead and darken this line so that I'll be able to see it more easily when I'm actually doing the handwork. And a lot of people say, well, you know, you should be using a marking gauge which makes a little cut and following that. Well, marking gauges are hard to see when you start having age issues with your eyes. And you can also learn how to cut to a pencil line. You know, you can cut to just the one side of the pencil line and be very accurate. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. And the pencil was just riding in the groove that I made with the marking gauge, so we're all set there. Okay, now we'll go ahead and we'll lay out the pins themselves. And to do that, I'm working on the left side. This is the face, so this is the inside of the drawer. I'm going to go ahead and clamp that up. And now I'm going to go ahead and get the left side of the left middle drawer. This is the outside. This is the front end. This is the bottom. So all I have to do is line that up on the marks that I had made. Try to get it exact as I can. Okay, we'll look good there. And again, take my pencil and just very carefully mark the sides of the tails onto the front, and that'll show me how big the pins need to be. And when I cut, all I got to do is cut just to the very inside of the pencil line, and we should have a perfect fit. Okay, now it's always a good idea to go ahead and mark now the parts that you don't want to cut into. So I see the pin, so next to the pin I'm going to put an X, another X, or I should say I'm putting X's on the pins themselves. These are the parts I don't want to cut out. So when I get going, if I confuse myself, all I got to do is look for the X and say, hey, that's the part that I don't want to be cutting into. Okay. Now, the last thing to do is to clamp this up and finish marking those pins. So I've got it clamped up, and now I'm going to go ahead and take my fine pencil here and make a little mark at the top of each pencil line. And then I'm going to take a good precision square and follow through those lines. Okay, and then not forgetting to put X's where I don't want to cut. So don't accidentally cut out the pins in my exuberance. Alright, and there you go. So this is going to be something that's easy to cut to. Now there's the age-old question as to whether you cut pins or tails first. I've seen the argument, I've read it so many times. Really do what works best for your particular application that you're involved in. In this case, you know, it made a lot of sense to use the lead dovetail jig to cut the tails for the fronts, but since I couldn't use it to cut the pins in these blind, you know, half-blind dovetails, you know, obviously I had to cut the tails first, and now I'm cutting the pins. You can do it either way. The important thing is being able to make accurate marks that you can then cut to.